there, besties. Today we're going to be diving into my absolute favorite topic, cellular respiration. Get ready to explore how cells turn food into pure energy, powering us through every heartbeat, breath, and brainwave. Let's get started. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. My name is Nurse Cheung, and I'm equipped with a master's degree in nursing education and 13 years of experience in the field. Cellular respiration begins with an amazing little molecule known as ATP. Think of it as your body's very best buddy. ATP, short for adenosine triphosphate, isn't just a fancy term, it's a crucial player for our cells. This molecule might sound like high-tech science, and that's because it is. ATP really packs a punch with its 3 phosphate groups, and it's a kind of nucleic acid. So what's the big deal with ATP? Every cell, whether it's a simple prokaryote or a more complex eukaryote, needs to produce ATP. But the way that they're going to manufacture that ATP is going to vary depending on the cell type. One fascinating method is known as aerobic cellular respiration, a process mastered by many organisms. In this video, we're going to be zooming in on how aerobic cellular respiration works, more specifically when it comes to our eukaryotic cells. Those are the cells that are equipped with membrane-bound organelles like nuclei and mitochondria. Eukaryotic cells make up everything from fungi, protists, animals, and plants. In this cellular narrative, it's the mitochondria that really steals the spotlight. These powerhouses play a crucial role when it comes to aerobic cellular respiration, hosting several key stages within the process. Let's take a broader look when it comes to the equation of aerobic cellular respiration. We start off with the chemical equation for glucose. In order to unleash that energy that's found within our glucose, we're going to need oxygen, more specifically 6 molecules of it. Through this dynamic process of cellular respiration, we're going to convert that glucose and that oxygen into 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, and that very fancy ATP. Whenever we're talking about science, I like to find things that are super interesting. So if you look at the equation when it comes to photosynthesis, they really look kind of same. The only difference is we switched our reactants and our products. For instance, in photosynthesis, we actually create glucose instead of using it as a reactant with cellular respiration. So do you want to hear something else that's super cool? Have you ever wondered how a seed sprouts and grows underground before it has leaves to perform photosynthesis? So here's the deal. When a seed first germinates, it relies on that stored glucose because it can't harness sunlight yet. It's going to break down that glucose through the process of cellular respiration to produce ATP, fueling its growth until it eventually reaches the surface. As that seedling matures and develops leaves, it's going to gain the ability to perform photosynthesis. From that point moving forward, it can both create its own glucose through photosynthesis and break it down via cellular respiration. It's really a dual power strategy. But here's the deal. If you're a human like me who's not equipped to actually perform photosynthesis, we need to obtain glucose from external food sources in order to meet those energy needs. So to kickstart our journey through cellular respiration, we're going to start with glycolysis. For this first step, we're going to need a little bit of glucose. Let's start with 1 molecule of it. We're going to begin by essentially breaking down that glucose. As the name suggests, because it ends with OSE, glucose is a type of sugar. During this stage of the process, it typically occurs within the cytoplasm and doesn't require oxygen, making it an anaerobic process. The term anaerobic just means without oxygen. Glycolysis involves splitting that glucose molecule, which consists of a 6-carbon ring, into 2 smaller 3-carbon molecules known as pyruvic acids or pyruvate molecules. So here's the deal. Glycolysis starts with an investment. It's going to require at least 2 ATP molecules in order to get this going. You can think of it as planting seeds for the future. By the time that we get to the end of this process, we're going to generate 4 ATP molecules, resulting in a net gain of 2. In addition to these ATPs, glycolysis is also going to produce 2 molecules of pyruvate, which is what we talked about before, and an additional 2 molecules of NADH, which are energy-packed particles. So you may be wondering, what the heck is NADH? Well, it's actually a coenzyme that plays a crucial role in transferring electrons, a capability that proves incredibly useful for generating even more ATP later on down the process. In step 2, those two molecules of pyruvate generated during glycolysis are actively transported to our mitochondria, landing directly in that mitochondrial matrix. Here, pyruvate are going to undergo oxidation, which is just a fancy way of saying that they're going to be transformed. Each pyruvate molecule is going to be converted into a different molecule called acetyl-CoA. This conversion is crucial because acetyl-CoA is really the star player in the next step of the cellular respiration process. Carbon dioxide is going to be released as a byproduct of this process, and another two molecules of NADH are going to be produced. Following glycolysis, we transition to the next phase known as the Krebs cycle. Many of you, if you've been taking school recently, may even hear it called the citric acid cycle. So in this cycle, we're going back to being aerobic, meaning that we have to have oxygen present in order to make this happen. During this cycle, carbon dioxide is going to be released as a waste product once again. In terms of energy yield, we're going to get a couple different things. We're going to get ATP, at least 2 of those. We're going to get 6 more NADH, but now we're going to get 2 FADH too. Just like with NADH, FADH2 is also a coenzyme that's involved in transferring electrons. It's mainly utilized as the last part of respiration through the electron transport chain. And lastly, we have the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. Truly, these are the marvels when it comes to cellular biology. In eukaryotic cells, these processes take place within the mitochondria, more specifically the inner mitochondrial membrane. This step again requires oxygen, making it an aerobic process. Here we have a very simplified breakdown. Electrons are going to be transferred from our NADH and our FADH2 across a series of protein channels and electron carriers. These electrons are crucial for generating a proton gradient, as protons are actively pumped across the membrane into the intermembrane space. This accumulation within the space is going to create both a chemical and electrical gradient. It's important to remember that hydrogen does not cross membranes on its own. They have to have a pathway in order to get there. Here, that pathway is provided with the incredible enzyme known as ATP synthase. Within this enzyme, adenosine diphosphate, which is a precursor of ATP, only has 2 phosphates attached to it. It's going to gain its third one through this process, making it ATP. So during chemiosmosis, proteins are going to rush down these electrochemical gradients through that ATP synthase, which harnesses this flow to synthesize ATP. And what's the grand finale? Oxygen is going to act as the final electron acceptor. When oxygen combines with hydrogen, we're going to get a result of H2O, meaning water. And this is an essential product listed in the overall reaction equation when it comes to cellular respiration. So you may be wondering exactly how much ATP is generated through this process. Textbooks often highlight that through cellular respiration, a single molecule of glucose can produce not only some heat, but also 38 molecules of ATP. However, this figure represents a best case scenario. More commonly, the yield that you could see should be between 29 to 30 ATP molecules. But as research continues to evolve in this area, the precise number is going to vary. So for now, we're just going to use the optimistic estimate of 38 ATP molecules. I hope that this video was helpful in understanding one of my favorite topics, cellular respiration. As always, if you have any additional questions, make sure that you leave them down below. I love answering your questions. You can head over to nursecheungstore.com. There's a ton of additional information to help you with those science exams. And as always, I'm going to catch you in the next video. Bye!